That's buzzbait fish. First thing in the morning.
It's first light on Clear Lake, and Galaxy Marine Pro staff member Chad Martin working on a buzzbait bite that he's had going on for a couple of weeks.
First bass of the morning here, caught on a buzzbait. And what we're doing, we're targeting these patches of grass that are heading up into the mouth of the slough right here. And typically these fish early in the morning will come up and feeding around these clumps. You got a lot of shad in around them and a lot of stuff for the shad to eat. And so they move up and they start feeding, and the bass just kind of mill in and out around these grass lines and kind of do the same thing. So what we're going to do is cover the mouth of this here with buzzbait and throw a little bit of frogs here, and so we can't catch a few more fish that are active this morning. They're wanting to eat. What I'm trying to do this morning is work this buzzbait. It's a little 3/8 ounce buzzbait, and I'm just trying to work it real fast over the top of this grass. And as you can see, the grass is pretty stringy, so you got to kind of move it kind of along pretty quick. But what these fish will do is come out and they'll eat usually around the edge of these grass. Sometimes they're in the middle of it. Most of the time they're on the edge of it. But I throw a 20-pound P line. This is a CXX, and this is a black blue buzzbait. I like the one that's dark color. Water up here is getting really hot. Lately it's been 113, 108 degrees up here. It's been really warm. And this lake gets an algae bloom on it. And when the lake blooms, it gets a little bit dingy. And so to clear the white baits and stuff like that, I tend to go to the dark baits, throw black first thing in the morning, and give a little bit more of a presence in the water. But you gotta try to pick these pockets to get your buzzbait moving from. And then once you get it moving, try to move it pretty quick, or you see you get fouled up like that. So it's a matter of casting clean, they call it. You know, cast as many times as you can and try to keep the bait as clean as possible, but most of the time it doesn't work as good as you'd like for it to. But it does catch a lot of fish in around this grass beds like this.
The buzzbait failed to draw any more strikes, so Chad switched over to a frog.
Been throwing a white frog up here quite a bit, and going to switch to a black this morning. Actually going to go to the this yellow-headed blackbird frog, they call it. I call it my Tweety, and it seems to work really good up here. There's a lot of blackbirds up here that have a yellow head, and I've never really seen them anywhere else. I've seen the red-winged blackbirds, and but this bait here really imitates these blackbirds up here that have a yellow head. I've seen several up here this morning, so we're going to put this one on and go through this a little bit instead, so we can get it to do a little bit bigger bite. I grew up back in Arkansas, and I've cleaned several fish and actually got them up and cleaned them, and they've had birds in their stomach. So I know these bass up here, they eat birds, they eat snakes, they eat basically anything that gets in their way is going to get eaten, I believe, as long as they get it in their mouth. So what we're going to do is work this perfect frog. Actually, this is a snag-proof frog. What I like to do is I like to thin the legs out just a little bit and trim them a tad bit, and it makes the bait kind of walk side to side, kind of like a spook a little bit on top of the water. Gives a little bit more action, and seems to draw several strikes. So we'll see if we can put this one to work and see how this one will do. Ooh, that's a nice fish. And you don't get them all either. As these frogfish, a lot of times when they eat, they're so aggressive, and they go down, they take it. And the bait's kind of a large bait, so sometimes they'll get that bait ball up in their mouth, and sometimes the rubber will get in the way and prevent a good hook set. But at least you can get the fight out of them a lot of times, and hopefully get back in and get another one. What we're doing now, we've actually moved to another spot. We're moving to another opening of another canal. Kind of what I'm looking for is a little bit of protection from the sun. The sun's getting up, so I'm going to kind of look for a few places that may have a little bit more shade. I'll throw the frog a little bit more in here, maybe throw a buzzbait. But try to get back up close to the bank and try to get where it's protected, that these fish maybe I can protect themselves from the sun, or while the crawdads might be around some of the base of these trees too. So we're gonna work this canal a little bit in here in some of the shade pockets and some of this primrose, and so we can get some more fish come up on this frog and help us out a little bit this morning. And by having this frog work like a spook, kind of back and forth, it really gives it an injured motion. As you can see, it's walking left to right really good. So by trimming those legs a little bit and playing with the frog, kind of tweaking on it, you can give it a lot more action than just the head bobbing up and down, going side to side. You know, sometimes not necessarily you think it's a bad cast. A bad cast can be a good cast up here. Like that right there. There we go. Perfect. That's a nice bass right there. I see that little injured motion going back and forth like that. Really draws a good strikes. And there's just a little piece of primrose right there that fish was sitting on. Well, they eat this thing good. That's about a 2.5 pounder right there. It's not bad. And what I like to do, I'm throwing this. This is the frog rod. It's a 735 PAL rod, and it's I got a Shimano Chronarch reel with 60 pound Power Pro braid. I like throwing the braid with a frog because when you're twitching and you're working it a little bit, it doesn't have a lot of give to it, a lot of stretch. So when these fish eat it, and you set the hook, you're not getting that, maybe 10 inches of stretch or so out of that line, and missing a lot of fish. And you need that in this heavy cover too when these fish are back up deep in this stuff. You need to get them out. You don't want to be playing around with them. You want to be able to get these fish out, as soon as you can, and have that leverage behind you to get it going, get them coming to you. Yeah, we pursued some more topwater fish over here this morning, and a topwater bite just really wasn't what we thought it was going to be this morning. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go out, we're going to go find some ledges and rock piles, and go throw some jigs, chatterbaits, and crankbaits, and so we can't get these fish to go on that. With the lake dropping like it has been, a lot of these weed beds that we've been fishing are actually exposed now, but I think there's fish here, they're just not really active this morning. The hot water could have put them down a little bit, the hot weather. But I think these rock pile fish and the fish on these ledges, they could go pretty good. So we're gonna make our way across the other side of the lake here and actually show you how to set up and look for that ledge, look for that break, and then back off and fish it. So what we're gonna do, we've come across over here, we've got a rock bank that runs all the way down, actually runs from the Narrows back over here to Lucerne. And there's a little break. It comes probably about 10 or 15 feet off the bank, and it's maybe 5-6 feet, and it drops off down to 10, 15 feet deep. Oh, missed. Working a jig off this little break. Just kind of bring it down, let it drop off and bounce along these rocks, working it down. And I'm actually throwing a Booyah head. It's got a little weed guard on it and a Yamamoto green pumpkin jig. And I had a bite just then. But what happens is as this break comes off, it comes off and drops off. And these fish will move up on that flat and feed sometimes, or they'll stay just right on the break, right where it drops. And so I just kind of work the jig just really slow, kind of bring it across and kind of try to imitate that crawdad as much as I can. Trying to make his way down that bank. Try to stay in contact with the bottom, which a lot of times you end up getting hung up. So if you're getting hung up, you're keeping the bait where you need to be. And you can feel it when it gets to that edge of that break, it starts to drop off. As it drops, you kind of slow down a little bit more, let the bait work its way down, let it swing down that ledge. And a lot of times these bigger fish sometimes will be on the bottom down here, right at the base of that ledge feeding. But I don't waste too much time when I'm throwing the jig up here. I kind of move it pretty quick. I think the fish they're aggressive. They're gonna come out and they're gonna take it pretty quick. So you don't have to waste a lot of time, I don't think, as far as letting it sit on the bottom and inching it across real slow. I don't think it takes too much time before you're gonna locate them.
After this break, Clear Lake starts heating up and the bass start biting too.
Come off that little ledge right there, jumped it.
Welcome back to Galaxy Marine's True Bass. I'm Justin Wolf. Chad Martin's on Clear Lake, and as the temperature rises, so does the number of bites.
Look out. That's what you call quick release. Jig. Come off that little ledge right there, jumped it. These are the kind of numbers that you can look at probably catching on these little ledges. They just roll back and forth up and down these ledges and feed on the crawfish and the bait that runs in and out. Every once in a while you can catch some big ones that run on these ledges also, but right now it seems like this is about the size. From here to about maybe 2.5 pounds has been the size fish you're going to catch. And as you see, that jig, just swing that little jig, as soon as it drops off that little drop off from about 5 feet down to about 8 is where the fish seem to be sitting. So we'll work our way down this little ledge here so we can catch a few more. Because typically when you find one or two, then from that little stretch on, especially if you get a little point that's coming up right here in front of us, from about the point to about 50, 60 yards down has been typically what's been holding the fish here in the past week or two. So we'll work this little ledge down through here until we can get a few more bites. That's amazing. You work this bank and you'll feel that flat. You can feel the rocks as you're coming down that flat about 4 or 5 feet. And just as soon as it drops off is where those fish are just must be roaming back and forth. See? Almost the exact same size. Those fish could all be brothers and sisters out of the same litter, looks like. Not bad. As this break on this bank right here only comes out maybe 10 or 15 feet from the bank before it drops off. We're actually sitting at about 9 feet. And I'm just kind of working that jig, bringing off that little break of those rocks up there. And it's amazing. They're just hitting it, they're taking off, just running with it. I think some of them you can probably wait a minute before you set the hook, the way they're chasing it. And another thing about Clear Lake is time of day. This lake sometimes can be like a real good early morning bite from first light to about maybe 8 o'clock, and then it just quits. And then a little bit through the morning, and it's almost 10 o'clock right now, from about 10 o'clock to the rest of the day, it could be a really good bite. So these fish are definitely, they seem to be on a timetable. And you know, what triggers them to eat at certain times, and I don't know, it could be the sun position, you know, if we had a full moon last night, you had no moon last night, it just all depends on the situation. And then we have a little bit of current drawing through right here also. You can see up on the bank, if you look real good, you can see the water drifting by these trees a little bit. So I think the farmers are still pumping a lot of water out of here. And that could be another thing. Early in the morning, the farmers might not be pumping as much water as they are later in the morning. And once it starts getting hot and they start irrigating and gets to the lake to moving, it may take 4 or 5 hours for them to start doing that. But as soon as it starts, maybe around 10, 30, 11, 12, then when you start seeing a lot more current and the fish get a lot more active. So it's kind of like fishing a tidal influence water, where just a little bit of movement in this hot water can get these fish really active. Just doing the same thing, just kind of walking that jig just real slow. Put some more Procure on there. I think the fish held on to it for quite a while. Another thing I like to use too is this Procure, this Sweet Crawl Super Gel. Take it and put just a little bit on my jig. Close the top, just kind of smear it on there real good. You know, it never hurts to have a little bit of scent on your bait. Draw a few more strikes, and it, you know, leaves that little bit of a scent trail that sometimes these fish will pick up on and come up and grab a hold of the bait and hang on to it just a little bit longer. So I got around this little point right here, and we're sitting at about 10 feet. We're a little bit closer to the bank than we have been. The drop off's a little tighter. Seems to be more fish on it. They seem to be real close to the drop. Run that little ledge, and it's on the back side of this point where it makes the roundhouse here. So we can pick up a couple more fish before we get to the beach here. The technique's pretty easy. The Powell rod I'm using is a 7-foot. It's a 7'3". It's a 734 with a Shimano reel, and I'm using a 6-2-to-1 reel because I'm throwing a little bit heavier jig. And I'm trying not to hang it up on the bottom, so I'm trying to walk it pretty quick, but keep bouncing the bottom. And it's almost like throwing a crankbait. It's just throwing a jig reaction style, not hopping it, just crawling it. So it looks kind of natural, like a jig. The crawdad is just kind of making his way across the top of the rocks. Real effective way to fish a jig up here because it's pretty shallow in this lake anyway. And I think the fish are gonna, if they're gonna eat it, they're gonna come out and find it. And they come in from the bank, they can hear that ruckus. They can detect that lead head bouncing off the rocks. And so it's just a matter of keeping the rod tip kind of high. I keep it at just about 10 o'clock. And I just kind of bounce it down, keep it real nice and smooth. And I like using at least 15-pound test line to 20. The reason being is you're throwing a lot of rocks, but when you set the hook, you're still kind of a reaction bite. And a lot of times these fish are grabbing it, they're going the other direction. So when they grab it and go the other way and you hit them, you don't want a line that's not going to be able to withstand the shock and the hook set. And this rod is an all-around great rod for throwing a jig, throwing a spinnerbait, crankbait. But the length I have on it, with that 7'3" up there, when I get that bite, I can drop my rod tip just a little bit. And as I come back with that hook set, I don't have to move the rod a whole lot to get a good hook set on the fish. So you get a lot of power when you set the hook with this rod.
Chad caught fish after fish on these rocks, but I think it's time we make a move to where we might be able to get a bigger bite.
Get a little smaller. What we did, we moved over to a bunch of docks with some pilings, and we started throwing this speed trap in between these pilings over here, and picked up a fish right off the bat, throwing a speed trap. Nice little fish there. And typically over here with these fish, whenever you're working around these docks, around pilings and whatnot, boat position's pretty critical. If you can make your cast right down alongside these pilings and bring it back as close as you can to them, usually these fish are sitting real tight to these pilings. These pilings have tires at the base of them, they have rock at the bottom of them, and they tend to hold a lot of fish. Size, You know, it just depends. You may get some big ones, you may get small ones, but you can always come most times to these docks like this and catch these fish. But the key is the boat position. Try to get your boat as tight as you can, keep it nice and tight to it, and bring your bait back as close to these pylons as possible. Because the majority of the time, the fish aren't going to run out to get it when they can sit right there in these pylons and not chase the bait very far. I'm throwing a chatterbait here around these poles also, running around there real shallow, and that fish come out and ate it. So I had a crawdad pass underneath there or something. That's a nice fish. So it seems to be as the day is getting warmer. Moving on, we're about 11:10 right now. Bite's picking up a little bit. Fish getting a little better. So you see, you move different structure. You have a good frogfish this morning, then you catch a lot of small fish on those rocks like that. Then you make you move over and start fishing, you know, things that have some shade on it. As you can see, the shade line right down along these docks that runs down through here. You know, the Clear Lake is full of docks, and you know, you just make your way through, working all these poles, and you know, don't hesitate to hit every single one, hit every one you can, because those fish live around these poles, and they stay in that shade, and it gives them a little more protection. So, and they definitely feed along big time as it gets a little warmer. So, apparently we're coming in that time of the day where they're really ready to eat and they get more aggressive. Okay. Do a little flip around there. Throwing that spider jig up around those docks, working around those pylons. He came out and just took it. Yeah, that's a nice fish. Nice, that's nice. Easy 3-pound fish right there. Picked up a speed trap, went down this row of pylons right here, and around the end out here, hooked this nice one here. Oh yeah, right out of the shade up there in that corner. Oh, that's a good fish. That's what you look for. Solid 3-pound fish right there. He's just a little bit more than 3 pounds, not bad. Good looking fish. Strong. Man, these things are strong. All right.
As Chad mentioned earlier, bass tend to school up this time of year, and I think this spot is about to prove that theory.
Right off the end. Yeah. There we go. Oh, missed him. A lot of times these fish will school up suspended in these docks, and just matter get them to eat. There we go. Oh, that's a better fish. Might be what we're looking for right there. No, shoot, no, he's around that pole. It felt good though. How they hammer this bait when they hit it, man. It's like they just don't want it to get away from them. Right down them poles. Is that 3 for 3 on there? We got a little school going. This is a blast. This is what it's all about. 100-degree weather, throwing crankbaits end of July, catching fish like this. You know, you can bring your family up here, your kids, and just have a ball. But you know, you just gotta keep covering the water, find the places that you can catch them, and you know, don't hesitate to look at everything: rocks, tulies, docks. So make it 4 in a row. Here we go. No. Same exact place. I think it's lunchtime down there. They're all stacked up at the table. This power crankbait rod handles these fish so well. It loads up real good. It's got a nice tip, so it really loads and gives you a lot of backbone to fight these fish. It's decent fish here. Fish are so aggressive when they're in little packs like this. That's good. He's almost 3. He doesn't look it, but he feels it. He's heavy. That's a nice fish. Now you need a rod that when you're working these crankbaits, you need a real moderate tip so that thing really loads up before you get the snap on the hook set. And then the rods have the capability to handle these fish really well. So we had 4 fish off the end of that dock right there, so we can make it 5. A bunch of them down there. Oh, there we go. Ooh, 5 in a row. So we set a record, pulling all of them off of it. This is a blast. You don't have to move anywhere. You just sit here and catch fish all you want. Oh yeah. Well, that's 5, so I guess we can go for 6.
Okay, Chad, we're just about out of time, but unfortunately there just isn't time to include Chad's 5-minute long detailed tackle talk segment in which he talks about all the baits he likes to use during summer on Clear Lake, including the chatterbait, which he caught a bunch of fish on today, but it just didn't make the show.
Another fish out there, what's that, 8?
But that segment will be included on the
Got a whole
DVD
school
that you can pick up for free at Galaxy Marine in Newcastle.
Terrible, just hurt my feelings. There we go. Okay, this morning we came up here to Clear Lake. Here it is in end of July. It's been pretty hot up here, and the bite has been really good. There's been a good topwater bite first thing in the morning, and then there's been a crankbait and jig bite as the day goes on. We started off this morning with the Snag Proof, actually they call it the Tweety Bird. It's the yellow-headed black frog that actually imitates the yellow-headed blackbird that's on this lake. And we caught a few fish on it this morning and did pretty good. Didn't catch quite as many as we thought we were going to. I don't know if the lake's been dropping a little bit and it may have hurt the bite just a tad bit. But I've been throwing it with this 7.6, actually this is a 735 PAL rod with the Chronarch and the Super Braid line, and it seems to handle these fish really well. These PAL rods are really sensitive, they're strong. For every situation that you need, as you can see laid out right here, we've got flipping stick, your crankbait rods, topwater rods, jig rods, and crankbait rods here. And they make a rod to handle every situation that you might come across. You can go to www.palco.com to locate your dealers around Northern California, Central and Southern California, and they're also nationwide across the United States. Another bait we're going to go to this morning is actually a chatterbait, which has been a really good bait out here on the West Coast. And what I've done is just modified just a little bit by putting a hula grub on this thing here. And I'm just kind of walking along the bottom like you'd do a normal jig, just getting a little bit extra vibration from that blade in the front. Throwing this on 17-pound CXX line. I'm actually throwing this on the flipping stick. And the reason I'm throwing on the flipping stick, it gives me a little bit more of a hook set, a little more power on the hook set, because I'm actually swimming off the bottom, keeping it moving. So when I get that strike, I can give them rod just a little bit to them and then set the hook and get a good hook set on them. The other bait we're also using this morning is a buzz bait. We caught a fish on that this morning. We also missed one. And this is a black blue buzz bait, just a single delta blade on it. And I like this bait because the color is dark. The blue, I just like using the blue blades this time of year up here. No particular reason, just my own personal confidence bait. And it seems to work pretty good. It's a 3/8 ounce. Doesn't make a lot of commotion, but it's real nice and subtle. And throwing this on a 734 PAL rod, using the 17-pound CXX line also. Another bait we're going to be using to catch a lot of fish this time of year on Clear Lake is a jig. And what I'm using is a Booyah football head, 3/8 ounce or a 1/2 ounce with the Gary Yamamoto twin tail green pumpkin black flake worm. And there's a lot of crawfish on this lake, and as the water starts to drop and all these little rocks and these ledges, it kind of moves these crayfish out quite a bit. They start moving and getting off to the deeper water. And there's a little bit of current being drawn through this lake from all the pumps, from all the farmers trying to irrigate all their property this year. So the crawdads will be moving along. So I can kind of move it a little bit fast. I make a cast and I keep kind of moving. I don't let it just sit for a long time. And I like to make as much disturbance as I can along the bottom. And you'll catch a lot of fish from now all the way through October, November up here on this lake with this jig. And vary your size head, vary the retrieve. But I like to typically do it a little bit fast, not real slow. And I'm also throwing this on a 734 rod also by PAL rods. The crankbait rods, I actually got 2 different rods here. This is a 703, it's a CB crankbait. It's a glass model. This rod it's a phenomenal rod for throwing crankbaits. You get a lot of load in the tip, but you got the backbone. The rod's a great rod for throwing bigger crankbaits and throwing the deep little ends. This is actually called a Smoky Joe. It's a Norman deep little end. Catch a lot of fish on this bait up here. And I typically crank on Clear Lake with a 10-pound test line. Seems to be my line of choice. Always when I throw my crankbaits, I throw them on a 5:2-to-1 gear ratio reel. This is actually a Sitica that I've had modified for my use for that. And then on the other crankbait rod, this is actually the 706 crankbait, and it's a graphite rod for cranking. And this is a Lure Jensen Speed Trap, which is an excellent bait for this lake this time of year. Crawdad pattern, doesn't dive too deep. You can cover a lot of water with it. I throw this on anywhere from 12 to 15-pound test line because of where I'm actually fishing with it. And also 5:2-to-1 reel, keeps it nice and slow, and you can keep the retrieve nice and steady. You can throw a speed trap with a 7.2 to 1 reel also if you want to, but I like the 5.2 to 1 just so I can control a little bit better.